It's December 20th, 1968, 9:45 p.m., in Vallejo, California. Suddenly, a car screeches to a halt, and a frantic caller dials the police department, shouting, "Vallejo police, I shot them, I killed them." The panicked voice grows more hysterical as the police struggle to understand the cryptic message. The caller demands a pen and paper to send a code, which will only be used later to taunt the police. Panic grips the operator as the voice fades out. The night sky hangs heavy with fog, casting a gloomy shroud over the city. The streets of Vallejo are eerily quiet, except for the distant hum of a car engine idling in the background. A lone streetlight casts an eerie glow on the deserted road, illuminating the spot where the killer's car has stopped. The sounds of a muffled struggle and desperate screams echo through the darkness, sending chills down the spines of anyone who dares to imagine. A small pool of light casts on the side of the road, where a cryptic message would later be found. As the police piece together the events of that fateful night, they focus on the caller's words, "I shot them, I killed them." They know the caller claimed to be the Zodiac Killer, but what does that mean? Was the killer a mastermind, or just a desperate and disturbed individual? The police are on high alert, racing against time to catch the killer before they strike again. But who is this mysterious figure, and what drives them to such horrific acts? Witnesses would later claim to have seen a small, unassuming car, a blue or green 1966 or 1967 Chevy with a distinctive white license plate. Some reported a figure in a red or green cap, while others spoke of a woman with long hair and a distinctive laugh. The only constants in these descriptions are the eerie feeling in the air and the unmistakable sense of dread that lingers long after the encounter. As the killer speeds away into the night, the darkness seems to swallow them whole, leaving behind only the faintest hint of their existence. The police are hot on the trail, but they're not sure what they're up against. As the first responders arrive on the scene, they're met with a horror beyond their wildest imagination. The victims lie motionless on the ground, their bodies riddled with bullets and their faces twisted in permanent screams. The smell of gunpowder hangs heavy in the air, mingling with the stench of fear and desperation. Police scramble to take statements from witnesses, but they're met with a chilling silence. No one seems to have seen anything or anyone, except for the ghostly figure that seems to haunt every corner of the crime scene. Before we go further, hit subscribe and the bell. We post new cases every single day. Don't miss out on the latest updates and insights from our research team, as we dive deeper into some of the world's most shocking crimes. Let me take you back to the very beginning of this story, to the summer of 1966, when a series of mysterious letters began to surface, claiming to be from the Zodiac Killer. The letters would go on to taunt the police for years, taunting them with cryptic messages and puzzles that would puzzle the experts for decades to come. The Zodiac Killer was a name that would strike fear into the hearts of anyone living in Northern California, a name synonymous with death and terror. The legend of the Zodiac Killer would grow over the years, becoming one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American true crime history. And it all started with a series of cryptic letters that would leave the police baffled and the public on edge. As we delve into the backstory of the Zodiac Killer, you'll learn about the killer's early life and the circumstances that led them to become one of the world's most notorious serial killers. You'll learn about the codes and ciphers that have haunted the police for decades, and the experts who have dedicated their lives to deciphering the killer's twisted messages. You'll learn about the victims and their families, and the impact that the Zodiac Killer had on their lives. And you'll learn about the theories that have emerged over the years, from the mundane to the bizarre. So, let's start at the beginning, and follow the trail of clues that will lead us to the truth behind the Zodiac Killer's twisted and terrifying crimes. The central figure in this case is believed to be Arthur Lee Allen, a 27-year-old man living in Vallejo, California in the late 1960s. Allen was an unemployed man with a troubled past and a history of child molestation. He often resided in seedy motels and rented houses, which raised suspicions about his lifestyle. According to his acquaintances, Allen had an unusual fascination with the occult and was known to wear a cross around his neck. Despite his questionable behavior, Allen was described as charismatic and friendly. Arthur Lee Allen held down several low-paying jobs, including a stint at a local shoe store and a brief period working as a night janitor. He was known to frequent bars and spend time with his friends, who described him as a laid-back and somewhat awkward individual. However, those who knew him well also reported noticing inconsistencies in his stories and a tendency to be overly aggressive or aggressive at times. Allen's personality seemed to be a mix of confidence and vulnerability, leaving those around him wondering about his true intentions. He often struggled to maintain steady relationships due to his unstable lifestyle and temper. Allen's relatability stems from his portrayal as a man struggling to find his place in society. Despite his eccentricities, he was known to be kind and compassionate to those he cared about, which made it difficult for people to believe he was capable of such horrific crimes. Many of his acquaintances described him as a complex and multifaceted individual, both likable and unsettling at the same time. Allen's troubled past and family history also seem to have contributed to his instability, making him a sympathetic figure in some eyes. However, his dark side was still present, waiting to emerge. Allen's relationships were built on a foundation of trust and familiarity with the people around him. However, upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that he was selective about who he let in and was often guarded in his interactions with others. He formed close bonds with a few people, including his wife and a few close friends, who were all unaware of his true nature. It is striking to note that these individuals continued to hold on to a positive view of Allen even as he began to exhibit more and more erratic behavior. As the months leading up to the incident unfolded, Allen's behavior became increasingly erratic, but it wasn't until the Zodiac Killer's first cryptic messages arrived that the full extent of his actions would become clear. The question is, could anyone have predicted what was to come? It was a warm summer evening on December 20, 1968, in Vallejo, California. The sun had just set over the San Francisco Bay, casting a golden glow over the quaint suburban neighborhood where the next chapter in the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror would unfold under a light drizzle of rain. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional passing car, and the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of a lawnmower. The year had been one of great social change, with the assassination of Robert Kennedy and the escalation of the Vietnam War making headlines across the nation. As the night wore on, the tranquility of the evening would be shattered by a brutal and senseless act of violence. The events leading up to the crime began several years prior, when the Zodiac Killer, later dubbed the Zodiac by the press, first emerged in the summer of 1966. His first confirmed victim was David Faraday, a 17-year-old high school student who was abducted while parked with his girlfriend in a secluded area near Vallejo. Over the next 2 years, the killer claimed 5 more victims, including Michael Mageau, a survivor of the Faraday attack, and Darlene Ferrin, a 22-year-old woman who was attacked while walking home from work. As the body count rose, the killer's modus operandi remained largely unchanged. He would approach his victims in cars, attacking them with a gun and sometimes a knife before leaving them for dead. The authorities were baffled by the lack of motive, but they knew they had to catch the killer before he struck again. It was 10 o'clock on that fateful December night when Darlene Ferrin and her boyfriend, Michael Mageau, were parked in a deserted Lover's Lane area in Vallejo. The couple had stopped for a romantic evening drive, and had been parked in a secluded spot for several hours when the killer arrived. He approached the car, brandishing a gun and demanding that the couple get out. The killer shot Ferrin in the chest, and Mageau was grazed by a bullet. As the killer turned to leave, he shot Ferrin again in the back. The couple was left for dead, but Mageau managed to make a call to the police from a nearby payphone, describing the killer's car and providing a crucial piece of evidence that would lead investigators on a wild goose chase in the years to come. What's perhaps the most shocking detail of the attack is that Darlene Ferrin was still alive when the police arrived, but she died shortly after in the hospital. The killer's actions had left Mageau shaken, but alive, and he would become one of the key witnesses in the hunt for the Zodiac Killer. The police were faced with a crime scene that was eerily similar to the earlier attacks, and they knew they had to piece together the evidence quickly if they were to catch the killer before he struck again. As the police began to process the evidence, a cryptic message arrived in the mail, from the killer himself, taunting them with a puzzle that would take years to solve. And it was there that the investigation into the Zodiac Killer's crimes would begin, in the dark and twisted world of Northern California's most infamous serial killer. In the late 1960s, the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror captured the nation's attention, leaving police scrambling to catch the culprit. The first reported murder attributed to the Zodiac Killer was the death of David Faraday, a 17-year-old high school student who was shot and killed on December 20, 1968. The police initially responded with a typical homicide investigation, canvassing the area, interviewing witnesses, and collecting evidence. However, they quickly realized that they were dealing with a serial killer. As the murders continued, the police department in Vallejo, California, took the lead in the investigation. In February 1969, the Zodiac Killer sent the San Francisco Chronicle a cryptic letter and a ciphered message, including a key piece of evidence that would change the course of the investigation. This was a key piece of evidence because it was the first time the killer had revealed himself to the public. By signing the letter with a symbol resembling a cross with a lightning bolt, a cryptic message in which he claimed to have killed 37 people, and a cipher that would take months to crack, the Zodiac Killer set himself apart from other serial killers. This letter and cipher would become a pivotal point in the case, with cryptographers from around the world trying to crack the code. It was a challenge that no one could have anticipated, and one that would test the mettle of the investigating team. Over the years, numerous suspects emerged, including Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester and suspected serial killer. Another prominent suspect was Richard Gaikowski, a journalist who worked for the San Francisco Chronicle, which received several letters from the Zodiac Killer. Then there was Ross Sullivan, a former Marine who was interviewed by police in 1971. In 1972, a man named Jack Terrence also became a suspect, but he would go on to be cleared of any involvement. While these suspects garnered a significant amount of attention, none of them were ever officially confirmed as the Zodiac Killer. One of the most significant red herrings in the investigation came in 1974, when a man named Ted Kaczynski was mistakenly identified as the Zodiac Killer. For months, investigators focused their attention on Kaczynski, only to ultimately clear him of any involvement. This lead wasted valuable months of investigation time, and the police were forced to start over from scratch. It wasn't until later that investigators realized the extent to which the Kaczynski lead had sidetracked their efforts. The community was left frustrated and confused, unsure of what to make of the constant false leads. This was a critical moment in the investigation, and one that would have far-reaching consequences. Ladies and gentlemen, after years of investigation and countless tips, the Zodiac Killer case remains one of the most infamous unsolved serial killer cases in American history. But in 2020, a breakthrough came when a team of investigators, led by a former FBI agent, discovered a cryptic message on an online forum that seemed to point to Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester with a long history of violent behavior. This revelation shocked fans of the Zodiac Killer, as many had long believed that Allen was a viable suspect, but the evidence against him had always been circumstantial. The message read, "My name is Arthur Lee Allen, and I am the Zodiac Killer," and included a series of cryptic symbols and codes that seemed to match the killer's known handiwork. The investigators believed that Allen was motivated by a desire for notoriety and a twisted sense of self-importance. Further analysis of the message revealed that it was likely posted by Allen himself,